Hello everyone! Today we're taking a look at the Caddx Loris. This is a 4K camera that records on board when you put your SD card right in there. You see also we have a few leads over there, obviously, to those that are initiated in this stuff. Yellow is your video, black is your ground, red is your voltage, and then you have your connector over here to change settings on the camera. We also have a button for starting and stopping the camera right here. If you're curious, you can wire this up to a flight controller. You have TX and RX right over here. There's a diagram on the caddxfpv.com website that lays out, I think it's the lower one that's RX and the top one that's TX. So you can control the recording, stopping, and starting from your radio. It weighs just a little over 11.5 grams. For camera mounting, it's a 14mm mount. 14.5 millimeters vertically, and from the nose to the back of the camera is 21.68 millimeters. The board mounting pattern is 25 millimeters, but it also comes with this little board so you can do other mounting patterns. It comes with the typical adapter for larger mounting, cable and control board so you can change settings on the camera, and some screws should you need them. First up is our light test. This is in the HD or 4K view. So you get to see how the camera lens or the camera sensor responds to dramatic light changes. The first two probably aren't all that real world, you know. It's pretty rare you get something directly on your lens, but maybe a leaf. And then the second one's about 1.5 feet away, and then the last one's about as far away as my arm can reach. Maybe it's 2.5 feet, 3 feet. I don't have particularly long arms. So that is a look at the light changes or light handling of the camera in that view. Let's jump into the FPV view. Here is the light handling in the FPV view. I've got quite a bit of noise from my VTX, so you have to kind of ignore those horizontal lines. And this is what you see in the goggles. You can see we've got the Caddx OSD elements on screen. The bottom right is your power on time. Bottom left is your power on time. Top right is your record time. No more flashing red or REC. We just have that run time up there. Or it says no card if you don't have an SD card in there. But we'll get back to the FPV view here in a little bit. So this is 4K, 60 frames per second video. It does other video frame rates as well. I want to take a moment to make sure that everybody understands that all the video that I shoot is either going to be at 4K, 60 frames per second, or it's going to be upsampled through editing, rendering. Just something that you have to do to make sure that this is something I believe needs to be done this way in order to make sure that the video source that we really want to be looking at, this 4K footage from the camera, is really not tinkered with very much by the editing process. Of course, YouTube is going to do its own thing with it, so if you're a video aficionado and you really have a fine eye for these sort of things, you probably want to be watching this in 4K. If not, then I've got a 2.7K sample that I'll link down in the video description. I noticed last time that almost no one watched that 2.7K sample. I'm going to go ahead and upload this one. Because of our special time in the 19 that we've got, our ISP is not bandwidth throttling or charging us for overages. They've actually just kind of allowed everybody to use as much bandwidth as possible, which is great because many people are working from home who have that fortunate ability, and my wife and I are one of those. So I would be well over our allotment pretty quickly. Our ISP isn't terrible about having an allotment, but that's something that I have to kind of rectify as we hopefully one day get past this to where we're all working from home and whatnot. But I'll go ahead and I'll link that 2.7K down below. We saw a look at the flowers, and we take a look at our neighbor's garage for those straight line views. You can see if there's any fisheye or distortion. I think the one thing about this camera, you know, as far as the 4K stuff, you've got to judge that for yourself. To me, anything above HD looks great, but it might not for those that, you know, are very much into the video. You might be video artists of some sort. I think what needs to happen with these cameras is we need to work on the FPV view. I've already shown you a little bit of the FPV view in the light testing that we did, but I still think that the FPV view, as far as an HD FPV single camera, the best one is still the Runcam Nano 3, the one that came in the Mobula 6. I think that is the best FPV view, but it doesn't do anything above 1080p. So if you're wanting 4K and you want a single camera, does the Tarsier do 4K? I think the Tarsier did do 4K, didn't it? That might be the only other option that you've got in order to get a good FPV view. Of course, that's substantially more in weight and not necessarily so micro-friendly. Oh, and I thought the audio on this particular one, on the Loris, was actually pretty decent. I'm going to reduce the audio, so those that might be sensitive to kind of that high-pitched whining noise, I'll reduce that, and I will also put on screen the words audio on, and then when that goes away, that means that I've turned the onboard audio off. For those that are sensitive, you can unplug your ears or unmute if you want to. From time to time, tell me if you're still seeing some digital shimmer in the leaves, depending upon the sun and the direction. I'm seeing it a little bit, kind of, I don't know if it's just because the leaves are higher than the quad, but it just, I'm only noticing it in the leaves. There's a little bit of a shimmer there, and what that might be. I noticed it fairly consistently, whether the leaves are in light and I'm in the shadows, or if the leaves are in shadows and I'm in the light, either one. So that might be something that I have maybe picked up on. You correct me on that. You people that are the video artists, the video aficionados, let me know what you think of this camera. Let's go ahead. We've seen several minutes of flight footage. We got to see a lot of different stuff, straight lines, curved lines, colors. We saw the red pickup. We saw the flowers. We've seen some dead grass. We've seen some live grass. Let's take a look at that FPV view. So here we are. Here's the FPV view. I think it's going to be tough to fly this in an environment that you're not familiar with the surroundings. You know, you can make out stuff, like you could look at those flowers and you could see that there were stems and leaves, but when it comes to other branches or anything of that nature, this is your flying experience. This is what you're looking at in the goggles. I don't think this is as good as the Runcam Split 3 Nano, the one that came on the Mobula 6. I still think that is the best one, but again, that one, of course, only does 1080p. It doesn't do 4K, so if 4K is what you're shooting for. And I would also like to know from those of you that do want 4K, I presume it just looks better to those of you that can tell a difference. But is there anything else in 4K that you get by having that 4K data, that you can manipulate it easier or something like that? You know, I don't do those sorts of things, so I'm curious on why you would want 4K more than 1080p, or maybe sometimes you want a better 1080p over 4K. I'm just curious for those people that are looking at these sort of cameras where video footage is of the highest priority that you have, and you want the best quality video footage that you can get, and in this case, you know, you're suffering on the FPV side. But I think in FPV, we need to see an improvement in the FPV view. Yes, I do still think the Runcam Nano 3 Lite that came in the Mobula 6 has the best one, but I still don't think it's efficient. Tell me if you agree. If the manufacturers stayed at 4K and didn't make, well, maybe they make some improvements on the 4K, whatever you guys are saying that need to be improved on, but I think the focus needs to be improving the FPV view. I don't know how they would work on that or how they would do it, but it seems like something that we need to have done in the single camera 4K HD / FPV. We need better FPV. I think most of us would agree, but those of you that are wanting that highest quality of video recording for use later probably still want cameras like this so you can put them in micros, go places that you can't with bigger quads, and get the footage that you desire. But that's my little rant. I just wanted to discuss that, and I want to see what sort of feedback I get from you guys. Don't forget, there is that 2.7K sample linked down in the video description. A few other specs if you didn't look on their website already to see. So they touted at 10 grams. We weighed that. They have a field of view. It's reported to be 165 degrees. License to Drive came up with a fairly interesting way of using a print that kind of connects to the camera and then it kind of loops around. Yes, license, I did look at it. I haven't printed one off yet, but that would be a way of getting a measurement for the actual field of view of the camera. And they do report that it's 80 megabits per second on the recording, and it does come in over that generally in my recordings. Covers in silver and black. Obviously, I have the silver one. And if we look at all the different video recording possibilities, 1080p at 60 frames per second, 1080p at 90 frames per second, 2.7K at 60 frames per second, 4K at 30 frames per second, and what I showed you was 4K at 60 frames per second. The reported latency is supposed to be 40 milliseconds. I didn't necessarily notice any latency, and you might remember on the Runcam Split 4, I had a little bit of an issue with my card, and I was blaming it on the card because I could feel the latency when I would record in 4K. I didn't feel it in this one, so that's something to note as well. Here is the last sample I'll show you. These are the settings of the camera, the Loris. To my knowledge, you cannot get into these settings if you've got a card in there. So take the card out, power it on if you want to change settings. It does have the OSD on screen, which you can see you can take those things on or off, and then we can get into the other video settings. We take through the different resolutions, whether you want to loop record, auto record. Of course, I auto record because why else would you have it? Record all the time, right? Some of the camera settings that you may or may not want to see. Of course, this one as well does the flipping. So if you need to mount the camera in a different way, you can flip the image, and the camera can be mounted upside down, so to speak, and you can flip the camera in the settings to where you can get the picture right side up, even though you might have it mounted upside down. Maybe it's for cable management, maybe it's for some other purposes. We also have the like frequency, 50 hertz and 60 hertz. You can go into the image and change the sharpness, the saturation, brightness, contrast, those different things, and you get to see those settings. Of course, it's NTSC and PAL. And then if you look at the system info, it will show you the version once we get down there. And you see that it's from June 2020. There's no way, in my knowledge, to set the date and time on these boards. I did see that question come up on Facebook. And of course, you can do 16:9 and 4:3 as well. So you're kind of stuck with the dates of however it comes in the recording. Last point to discuss is the price and what you've seen so far. Drum roll. Well, the price on the Caddx FPV website for the Caddx Loris, which is this camera right here, is $79 flat. So what do you think of that price for the image quality that you've seen, and the board and the weight and all the different features of this camera? Is it worth $79? And if you're not someone who's interested in HD, maybe tell me why you don't like HD. I like HD, but it's very specific. It feels like, I'm in an awkward position to where I have access to a lot of different kind of quads. I get these things for review, and then I choose whether to give them away or to keep them. And I will do giveaways, but it's going to be down the road again. I'm not wanting to stand in line with a bunch of people who aren't wearing masks. So giveaways will return when normalcy returns. But I don't know that I would keep a quad for all these different scenarios if I had to pay hundreds of dollars for each one of the quads, or even $100 for each quad. So I'm curious, to those of you that do want this sort of camera, what do you plan to do with it? What's your primary flight style or flight desire? And those of you that don't, the opposite. Why don't you? If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.